All right, fifth graders, welcome to a lesson on classifying quadrilaterals. Everything that you see on this page in front of you, on this screen in front of you guys, is listed with the word quadrilateral. You can see it right here, quadrilateral, quadrilateral, all the way across this page. And that obviously has significance. Hopefully from this page you can identify that everything on this list starts with the prefix quad. Quad means four, so everything on this page is a four-sided figure. All right, so our job then is to name and get as specific a name as we can for each of these four-sided figures. All right, so as we look at this right now, some of them are going to only really fit into one category. We can only really call it a quadrilateral, whereas others on this sheet will be much more specific, that we can get all the way down to a parallelogram, a rectangle, and eventually a square. So because of little rules and little checklists that we have in place, we should be able to determine which categories this or these quadrilaterals belong to. If you take a look at this page right here, and we'll go back and forth hopefully between these two pages fairly easily, you see that we have different categories and different groupings that these belong to. If you look at the top, you can see that quadrilaterals is the top thing because everything on that other page is considered a quadrilateral. So I'm not going to waste our time. I'm just going to say all shapes from the other page will fit into that category. Now, the next piece of information, or the next step for us in this process, guys, is to take those shapes from the previous page and put them into the correct categories on this page, where you can see that we have parallelograms, trapezoids, rectangles, rhombuses, and squares. And we're simply going to add the letters of those shapes into the proper categories. And if it's already a quadrilateral, like we said, we are not going to place that in any categories because we've already said that the quadrilaterals only belong into the top space there. So as we go back to this page and we take a look at quadrilateral A, we can see that yes, this is a quadrilateral, 1, 2, 3, and 4 sides. Very easy to see that. But now we need to determine, does this quadrilateral belong to any of the other groups or categories? So if we go back to this page, we should see that the next two groupings that we could put this quadrilateral into would be parallelograms or trapezoids. Well, we have to understand what the rules are for parallelograms and trapezoids. A parallelogram, guys, is exactly what its name says. Has and contains parallel sides. Now, very specifically, it contains two sets of parallel sides. So, if we have two lines drawn here and two lines drawn here that are determined parallel to one another, like this, that is a parallelogram. Okay, so anything that has opposite sides are parallel, and it has two sets of parallel lines, we are putting that in the parallelogram category. As we look at the trapezoid, it is a much more specific rule, and it is in the category by itself. Trapezoids are quadrilaterals that only contain exactly one parallel side, or one set of parallel lines. Pen's running out here. One parallel set. Okay, so as we look at this trapezoid here, guys, you can see that this side is parallel, meaning they will never touch. They will continue on forever and ever without touching as we extend these lines out moving forward. Okay, they will never come in contact with one another, whereas this set of lines, if I continue this line moving forward and this line, notice how they are getting closer and eventually would touch. So this shape here with one set of parallel lines is considered a trapezoid. So that's going to be the first category we look for as we move forward with these shapes. So as I look at shape A, guys, I can see that this line here and this line here, which would be the two that would have the best chance of being parallel, I look, if I extend these lines out, there is no way that those are parallel lines. So those two lines will eventually touch. So we can already rule out the fact that this is a parallelogram. Okay, how about the lines going this way? If I go this way and this way, same thing. Now this might take a little longer, it might be a little harder to see those lines moving across, but again, you can see those lines are getting closer, so those lines are also not parallel. So that means that this shape is neither a parallelogram or a trapezoid, and the only category we can place this shape into is the 1, 2, 3, 4-sided quadrilateral. All right, let's jump across to letter B. All right, so again, we are looking at quadrilateral, 4-sided figure. They've already marked those 4 sides for us. And this symbol here, guys, simply means that these sides are equal. Anytime you get, we call them tick marks or markings on a side, as long as those sides contain the same number of marks, that means that they are equal to one another or congruent. All right, so they're kind of telling us already a lot about this shape B. Now, hopefully, you guys recognize that shape. That looks like a pretty obvious shape to me. So as we go back to this previous page, shape B, would that be considered a parallelogram or a trapezoid? Okay, so we look at that shape, and we can see that this side here appears to be parallel to that side, so it's for sure at least a trapezoid. But now let's look at these 2 lines here. Those also appear to be parallel. So that means that this shape is for sure a parallelogram. Oh, wrong direction with my button. So that means that this is a parallelogram. And we can't have anything be both a parallelogram and a trapezoid. That is a decision that needs to be made. It is either this or this. It cannot belong to both categories. Now, we're still talking about shape B, guys, so now let's scroll down here and identify that parallelograms also have 2 categories that they can belong to. Okay, and that 2 categories would be this line followed down here, which takes us to the rectangles, and this line here, which takes us to the rhombuses. Okay, they're both types of parallelograms. They just have more specific rules to follow. Rectangles, let's start with that one. Now again, I know that everybody in our class has probably heard of the term rectangle before and has probably seen a rectangle and could definitely point a rectangle out. Now, what is the classification and characterization of what makes that a rectangle? Well, rectangle, because the name has angles in it, means all about the angles, guys. And rect in German means right. So we are looking at 4 right angles. So a parallelogram with 4 right angles, 1, 2, 3, and 4, fits the category of a rectangle. To be a rhombus, it is a parallelogram with 4 equal sides. All right, so any quadrilateral that is a parallelogram can also be a rhombus if it contains 4 equal sides. So let's go back to this shape here, point B. Well, we see that it has 4 equal sides, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it is a rhombus. Those are 4 equal sides. We also see that it has 4 right angles. So again, this is turning out to be a pretty specific quadrilateral, guys. This belongs to both the rectangle category and the rhombus category. Okay, it is both a rectangle and a rhombus. Now, if a shape belongs to both of those categories, it will then automatically, guys, belong to our last category, which is a rectangle with 4 equal sides. So rectangles with 4 equal sides automatically get placed in the category called a square. And I think you could have identified right away at the beginning that shape B was a square. We've seen squares since kindergarten, guys. You've identified shapes all the way through since that point. So I know you know what a square looks like, but we are trying to understand the why. Why is this shape considered a square, and how do we get to that following the rules? All right, so let's do shape C. All right, just a couple more shapes. We're not going to go through many more here. I will put a couple of these shapes on for our questions moving forward, and you will have to identify what categories or which names we can give to these shapes. So a couple more shapes here. Let's do C first. All right, as we look at shape C, it is obviously a quadrilateral. It's named quadrilateral, but in this instance we see another different symbol here. We can see that this side and this side are the same length, but we can see 2 hash marks or 2 tick marks on this side, which tells us that not all 4 sides are the same, but that the opposite sides are equal. Now, quadrilateral C still appears to have 2 sets of parallel lines. I don't believe that these two sides will ever touch, and I don't believe that these two sides will ever touch. So we are still looking, if we go back to our previous page, we are still looking at a parallelogram and not a trapezoid. And once we determine that it is a parallelogram, now we need to determine, is it just a parallelogram? Is it a rectangle? Is it a rhombus? Well, we talked about with shape B that all four sides had to be equal for it to be a rhombus, and in this case we don't have four equal sides. We have two sides, the opposite sides are equal, but they are not all four that are equal. So then we take a look at the angles, the right angle or the rectangles that we are talking about, and to be a rectangle it must have four right angles. I don't see any right angle symbols in this shape. So we are done classifying shape C as simply a parallelogram, and the only category that it belongs to other than the quadrilateral category would be the parallelogram category. It does not belong as either a rectangle or a rhombus, so we can stop at parallelogram. All right, one last shape before we wrap this lesson up and put a few more questions into your guys' hands to try and solve this. Shape D. Actually, you know what? I'm going to skip shape D. We've seen that before. We've talked about that shape already. So I'm actually going to look at shape P, because we have not dealt with any of these yet to this point. So as we look at shape P right down here, it is obviously a quadrilateral, and it's already been marked in that category as all shapes. Okay, so now we need to identify those parallel lines. Are there any? If there are, is there only one, or are there two sets of parallel lines? Well, I can look at this side right here, and this side does look parallel to this side. And again, if I extend these lines out, they do not appear to be getting closer. Those two appear to be parallel. So at the very least, we should have a trapezoid. If we look and identify these two lines, will they, if they continue on, eventually get closer and touch? It does look like that to me. So it looks to me like we are staring at a quadrilateral with one set of parallel lines, and that again puts me in the trapezoid category as a P instead of the parallelograms. And once we get to be a trapezoid, guys, we don't have any more questions to ask. We don't have any places to go. If you notice, there are no lines extending down from the trapezoid. That is the only thing it can belong to when it has one set of parallel lines. Parallelograms, we've got a few more questions to ask and a few more categories that it can belong to. All right, thank you, fifth graders, for paying attention to this. And again, hopefully, over the couple of days of lessons that we will handle this situation, that you will be able to understand which categories and which types of quadrilaterals we are dealing with. And hopefully, we will give you, or you will be willing to ask questions if there are things you don't understand about those questions. Have a great day.